all day on Friday and a fairly grey morning with outbreaks of rain across much of England and Wales. Brighter skies follow, but so do the strong winds and increasingly snow showers over northern Scotland. In fact, that snow turning more and more persistent over northern Scotland, mostly over hills, but even at low levels there could be some, and routes like the A9 will be particularly treacherous with those strong winds making for blizzards. There'll be a bit of brightness in the afternoon, but it's not going to feel warm. Those winds are the biggest cause for concern widely across northern and western areas. Later on Friday, gusts of 50 to maybe 65 miles an hour, and an amber Met Office warning in place for the northeast, where gusts of 75 miles an hour, perhaps even a little more in some places during Friday evening and into Saturday morning. There is a warning for the snow as well. Those kind of winds could cause some structural damage, certainly make for some disruption on the roads, potentially cause some power issues also. There will be this zone of wet weather then sinking south on Friday night. That will still have some snow mixed in, mostly hills, but there could be a little bit at lower levels, so that's an extra hazard. Details of that snow on Saturday still uncertain. It does look as if there won't be much at low levels, and if there is, it'll melt fairly quickly. But still a cold wind blowing on Saturday. The weather warnings are all on the Met Office website. Bye for now.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Neil Oliver. You can join me live every Saturday evening for opinions and discussions about the week's top stories. There's also a smattering of history and archaeology and features that define our great British Isles. You'll hear my thoughts unfiltered, as well as those of my guests, and we don't always agree. And we want to hear from you too. Neil Oliver Live, Saturdays from 7 on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll be getting into all the stories that have got you talking tonight. I'll give you a little hint of what is coming up tonight. We remember, of course, the tragic situation in the Channel yesterday. The conversation today rumbles on. How do we fix this situation? The boats have carried on crossing. Also, the Army, we've seen a big new strategy announced today. Got to be honest though, it's all about cost saving. We'll have less boots on the ground. Does that make you feel any less safe? And energy, if you're a taxpayer, which I'm hoping most of you are, we've got another bill, over £1 billion, to kind of keep the lights on at yet another energy company. It's made people talk again about nationalisation. So I'm interested, do you think our government should be basically running gas and electricity companies? We'll have all of that and more coming up, but first, the news headlines.
Hello, I'm Karen Roberts. These are your latest headlines. GB News has been told a body has been recovered from a beach near Calais. It's not yet clear whether it's linked to the tragedy that saw the loss of 27 lives in the Channel yesterday. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has said there's no quick fix to the migrant crisis. Her department is offering to send British police to France to help patrol beaches.
I have literally, Madam Deputy Speaker, just spoken again with my French counterpart, Minister Gummerman, and I've once again reached out and made my offer very clear to France in terms of joint France and UK cooperation, joint patrols to prevent these dangerous journeys from taking place. I've offered to work with France to put more officers on the ground and do absolutely whatever is necessary to secure the area so that vulnerable people do not risk their lives by getting into unseaworthy boats.
French fishermen are planning to block the Channel Tunnel and the port of Calais over the ongoing licence row with the UK. Downing Street says the government has contingency plans in place in case of a disruption to supplies. The French are demanding more rights to fish in British waters. A 34-year-old man has appeared in court charged with the murder of a married couple in Somerset. Colin Reeves is accused of killing Jennifer and Stephen Chappell. They were stabbed to death in their home on Sunday as their children slept upstairs. The Defence Secretary says the British Army will be leaner but more productive in future. Personnel will be deployed for longer periods abroad in a new network of hubs in places like Oman and Kenya. Ben Wallace told MPs he expects the regular army to have 73,000 personnel by 2025. A new Ranger regiment will also be formed to counter extremist organisations and hostile state threats. Alcohol-related deaths hit record levels during the pandemic. Figures show that they increased by 20% in England and Wales and by 17% in Scotland. There's also been a 27% rise in deaths among people receiving treatment for addiction. The UK Addiction Treatment Group says a concerning number of facilities closed their doors during the pandemic, and the rise in deaths can't be a coincidence. 1 in 6 days of the official bathing season were unswimmable last year because of pollution near beaches. That's according to a new report. Campaign group Surfers Against Sewage found that in more than 5,500 alerts of sewage being discharged into coastal waters were issued by water companies last year. It marks an 87% increase on the previous year's figure. More than 130 pedestrians have been injured by e-scooters in Britain over the past year. Department for Transport figures show 37 people suffered serious injuries and 21 children were hurt. More than 700 riders have also suffered injuries. 3 were killed. First-time buyers face having to pay, on average, 5.5 times their typical annual salary to get on the property ladder. A nationwide study has found it breaks the previous record in 2007 and is significantly higher than the historical average of a house being 3.8 times your annual salary. Figures confirm that London continues to have the highest price to earnings ratio. The government is expected to green light proposals to create an independent regulator to oversee English football. It was the key recommendation of the fan-led review that was commissioned in April after the European Super League row. 6 English Premier League clubs formed part of the breakaway before pulling out of the plans after significant backlash. Rare panto costumes worn by a young queen during World War II are on display for the first time at Windsor Castle. A teenage Princess Elizabeth and her sister, Princess Margaret, wore the outfits when they took to the stage in a performance of Old Mother Red Riding Boots. The display is part of a special Noel exhibition and includes a pink satin and lace dress worn by the Queen when she was 18 years old. That's all your news for now. Let's get back to Dewbs & Co.
So
Thanks for that, Karen. Well, joining me until 7 o'clock tonight, my panel, Ellie Mae O'Hagan, the Director of the Centre for Labour and Social Studies, Ali Mirage, who's a columnist at The Article, and Laurie Leybourne-Langton, who's an environmental policy researcher. Good evening to you guys. Also, you know the drill as well on this show. It's not just about us, it's about you and your thoughts. I'd like to know what you're thinking tonight and all your comments on any topic that we're discussing and anything that you think I might be discussing or should be discussing that I'm not. You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Dave, you're the first one off the blocks today. Dave, you got in touch and said, Michelle, this government couldn't run a bath. That is in response, I imagine, to the question when I was asking you, do you think they should be running our energy companies? We'll have that one coming up later on in the show. But first, let's go to one of the main stories, of course, the tragic events of yesterday. After 27 people drowned near Calais after their boat sank in the Channel, it's been confirmed that it was 7 women and 3 children who were among the dead, while 2 people have been rescued. Little is known about what made the boat sink. French police have made 5 arrests in connection with the fatal crossing, and yet today the boats have kept on coming. 40 made the crossing this morning. The UK and France have agreed to crack down on the people traffickers and the gangs who are putting lives at risk. But, I mean, Laurie, I'll pick up with you. The conversation, you know, we've seen this go on. It's actually gone on for years now, this conversation of who should be doing what and who's to blame. Yet the boats keep on coming. And as we saw yesterday, the terrible situation of people losing their lives. What is, and I feel like a stuck record because the question is almost on repeat, day in, day out, because the situation is not stopping. But what do we do?
I think the first thing we've got to do is think about the loss of life that we had yesterday and remember that they were people that lost their lives, people that were fleeing horrendous situations, potentially, in countries that they've come from. And then we've got to understand the journey by which they end up coming to the UK or end up getting to the situation that they found themselves in yesterday, that terrible situation. And one of the big problems here is the sort of securitisation, the way the government manages the process of allowing people into this country can be so harsh. It forces people into situations where they end up, for example, having to cross the Channel and putting themselves at extraordinary risk. Well, making it very difficult to, in the process of applying, say, for asylum, very difficult to meet certain criteria so that they're legitimately allowed into the country. And when people are faced with that kind of regime, they're pushed into situations where they have to seek other ways to get into the country. Well, that ends up what's happening. Ali, your view?
Well, I sort of don't quite follow, because if they're genuinely fleeing persecution, I would have thought that they would want to just seek safe harbour in the first safe country, inverted commas, that they land in. The situation that we've got here is that people are willingly trying to cross that channel, and it's absolutely tragic what happened yesterday. People putting their lives at risk, being subjected to this by unscrupulous people smugglers that are charging up to £6,000 for this crossing. And it's fundamentally absolutely a travesty what's happening here. But I think Laurie's right in this sense, that they do feel that if they make that crossing, the chances of them coming in are higher. Now, how do we get round this? There has to be more coordination with the French. The Home Secretary has given them 54 million. They've been trying to do increased drone surveillance on the coast. It's not worked. Priti Patel a few months ago was talking about hiring big boats to make waves in the ocean to try and push boats back towards France. That didn't work. There was talk about processing them offshore. That didn't work either. But I do think that at the moment, there has to be a situation where the two sides come together, and there is a lack of trust, Michelle, at the moment between the British and French sides, partly over fish, partly over the Northern Ireland Protocol. So it's not the best time. Our relations are not the best. And you also have to look at this through the lens of domestic politics. Emmanuel Macron has got a presidential election next April. He wants to show that he's tough. Boris Johnson has got his own domestic problems here, with 77% of Tory voters now seeing the migrant crisis as a serious issue of credibility in the government. So I think both sides have got their own issues, but they need to come to the table to try and resolve this in a meaningful way.
And do you think they can resolve it? I mean, to me, this is an immediate problem. So it's all well and good having these long-term strategies of what we do, but in the here and the now, you know, we've just explained the awful situation that happened yesterday, and yet still, with the knowledge of that, people are still carrying on, Ellie.
Well, I agree with you that in the immediate term, what we need to do is make sure that organisations like the RNLI and the Navy are making sure that people who are at risk at sea are safe and they're taken to a safe place and that they're treated if they have any medical issues. That is definitely the first thing that we should be doing.
But do you think that's encouraging, though, this situation? Because the fact that people know that if they can get into English waters, they know that they will be essentially rescued. Don't you think that that is encouraging people to make this crossing?
I think, you know, when you've got children, you know, there's a pregnant woman on that boat. There were people on there with their children. People don't do that unless there's a really strong reason to do that. Those people were coming here seeking safety, and I think as caring people, it's our responsibility to show them some compassion.
But they were safe in France, though, wasn't there?
Well, the reason... So I think... I'm really glad you said that, actually, because there is a myth that I think we need to bust about people who come to this country seeking safety, and that's that they don't go to the nearest safe country. Actually, most people do. Those countries have the biggest number of migrants. Jordan, for example, has some of the highest numbers of refugees in the world. France has more refugees than we do.
But it is a safe country for them, isn't it?
People coming here, yes, but they come to this country because they have family connections here, because they can speak English and maybe they can't speak French. And actually, I think we need to ask, why are people peddling this false idea that everybody is coming to this country? And I think it's to distract us.
But who said that?
You just did, and Ali just did.
Hang on. Sorry. I did not say everybody is coming to this country, because that would be stupid. I didn't say that.
You are saying, why aren't they staying in France?
Yeah, I am saying that.
Most people are. But the people who do come here because they have good reasons for coming here. And I think by arguing that they should stay elsewhere, we're doing that in order to not meet our duty as caring people, to welcome people here and to quickly integrate them into our community so they can rebuild their lives.
I disagree. Firstly, I never said that they're all coming here at all. Secondly, we do have a long history.
But I think you need to be really careful then with what you say, because you know a lot of people who want these at-risk people to come to harm do peddle these myths.
But no one wants at-risk people to come to harm. I don't think ever. I don't think I've met anyone
who want these
Ellie,
people
are you
to come
telling
to
me
harm.
really that people want 27 people to die in the ocean? Really?
Yes, I mean, Katie Hopkins only a few years ago wrote a column for the most popular newspaper in this country advocating that very thing.
But hang on, hang on a second.
But can I just say, sorry, after you, Michelle.
Hang on a second, because I think we need to be very clear here, Ellie, because what you're suggesting, and I think it's actually quite wrong, you're suggesting, and never mind Katie Hopkins or anyone like that, you use the example of myself and Ali. Neither of us want anybody to come to harm. In fact, actually, I want people to stop making this crossing, because by doing so, you are indeed putting yourself at risk of harm, especially when I look at children. I am a mum. When I see children being put onto these boats, I really want them to stop doing it. So I absolutely don't want anyone to come to harm. Ali, I know that you don't want that either, so I'm not really sure where that
I'm really
has
glad
come
you
from.
said that, actually, because I think we definitely can agree on that. And I think the one thing that we've learned in all of human history is that people move. They move, like I moved from Wales to London because I had hopes and dreams. I wanted something bigger than I could get at home, so I moved to London 10 years ago. You know, people move...
But it was legal for you to do so.
People move from the... Yeah, but the problem when we talk about that, the problem that we don't acknowledge is that it's very, very hard for people to come here legally. And every time we put up a new law and every time we try to stop these channel crossings, a people smuggler, one of the people who's been arrested today in connection with this, rubs their hands with glee, because people will move, and they always have, and that is a part of human history. What makes us brilliant is our ability to dream and our ability to chase those dreams and to do brave things. People move, they always have, and we need to make that safe for them. That's the only solution to this, is making that safe. So if you really do say you don't want people to come to harm, which I do agree, I do believe you about that. You know, we've done a few of these things, and I know that you really feel these things deeply, so I do recognise that. But I think really the only solution to that is let people come on a ferry, let them come on a plane, and then make sure that we have a fair and efficient asylum system that processes people quickly so they can rebuild their lives.
So you want anyone to be able to come, as long as they come in a safer route than this, and then once they get here, we sort it out from there?
I think that, you know, we have the means to look after people in this country, and what we're talking about
we have a homeless issue.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
No, because you do make your points and you take quite a long time, and there's quite a lot of people on the panel, Ellie. So anyway, I'm going to shut up. Ali, you come back in.
I think Ellie makes some important points, but I think there is a distinction to be made between people genuinely fleeing persecution and people who are economic migrants. We have always had a long tradition in this country of taking people who are generally fleeing persecution. Look at the Ugandan nations that fled under the regime of Idi Amin. We did that. We've always had this tradition. What we can't have is a situation where certain people are abusing the system. I'm not saying that the people who died yesterday or the majority of the 25,000 that have tried to make this crossing this year are economic migrants, but certainly some of them probably are. They shouldn't be abusing the asylum system and paying money to unscrupulous people smugglers to do that. And also the other thing is, on this position of people going to the first safe country, when we were members of the EU, under the Dublin Convention, if you went into a country and you were not allowed there and you'd cross through another safe country, on your way to that country, you were sent back. Now we're not in the EU anymore, so we have to rely on our relationship with France to ensure that these people are sent back. Now the French have got their own issues, got an election coming up. French voters don't particularly want loads of asylum seekers coming into their own country. They do make it very difficult. It's a lot less welcoming than actually the UK is. And in fact, the French themselves, the French authorities are saying, they're blaming the UK in part, saying, you're making it too attractive and too easy for people to come. You should be being much tougher on them so that it's less attractive to come.
Well, let's bring Laurie back in.
This point about where people are going in the first instance is really important. And let's just imagine a situation where there was a civil war in Britain, right? And a half of the population, about 30 million people, had to leave this country because it was so awful. Now, the vast majority of those people would end up staying within the UK. That's what happens elsewhere in the world. About 4 out of 5 people end up staying and suffering within the region in which the bad thing has happened. Then, loads of us would get over to France, right? And probably about 4 million of us would remain in France itself, the next nearest place. And that's similar, say, Turkey. It holds about 4 million refugees at the moment from various situations in the Middle East and North Africa. Then a small number of people would then start to try and go to the places where they have the greatest connection to. As Ellie was saying, they speak the language, they have connections of family and that kind of stuff. So let's say we went to try and go to some of the African countries that speak English as one of the primary languages. And then when we try to get in, but the way in which we get in, the paperwork we have to fill out, the reasons we can have that are legitimate, are so tough. But we had this war in our country. We want to get to the family members in that country. And also it's the place that we've heard most about, we have the greatest connections to.
How do you know these people have all got family connections, by the way?
Well, you ask them. There's been lots of.
Of course, yeah. I mean, if I want to go somewhere and someone says to me, "Is your family there?" Of course, I'm going to say yes, they are.
But why are there so many men coming across on their own? By the way, can someone explain that to me? If they're genuinely fleeing persecution, wouldn't you go with your family?
Time and time again.
People often go first and then they send.
Yeah, but why do they go first? If you're genuinely fleeing persecution, would you not want to take your wife and child with you?
Well, because what they're hoping is they can come to this country. So
how much danger are they in?
Hang
on a bit, but we've just extrapolated up there. Now we're talking as if it's only men or majority men, or that's the image we have in our minds. But a lot of.
But that's reality, though, isn't it? It's not an image. That is reality. But do you concede that point? That's not an image. That's not a policy.
I have not counted and assess the gender balance of
every single person. Well, 27 people who died yesterday, there were 7 women supposedly, right? And the rest were, we assume, men.
Every organisation that's working with those who are seeking to escape the conditions that have led them to seek asylum in the UK, the United Nations and the refugee rights organisations in the United Nations, the people who are working on the ground say time and time again that the harsh regime, when it comes to being able to get into this country, is a contributor toward the criminalisation, the gangs that then are exploiting people, the fact that people go out in the middle of winter in one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, right, and end up getting themselves
Do you think
into
it should be rigorous to get into a country? Or do you think it should be easy? Do you think the process should be rigorous, in depth, all that stuff, challenging? Or do you think it should be lax and easy?
Of course there should be elements of rigour in it. Yeah. It doesn't need to be either or of those two things. An issue becomes when you conflate what's really going on, that people are seeking to come to this country for a variety of reasons, not just because, someone's handing out leaflets in a country and saying, you should go to Britain, they're a soft touch. We need to look at all the different reasons. We need to provide the ability for people to be able to come and seek asylum in this country, who have got a variety of reasons and connections and other things. And we need to then ensure that the passage for those who at the moment are seeking it across the channel is not as dangerous as it currently is. And often all of these things get mixed together, and it sometimes sounds as if some people are saying, let everyone in, build a bridge and just let them walk over, and the others over here are saying let them drown in the channel. And we're not allowing the nuances in between those two positions, which hopefully no one holds those extremes necessarily. We need to explore those things, you know?
Yeah, and you guys are getting in touch as well. They're asking how, I mean, I've got so many emails just actually flying through on this topic. There seems to be a general sentiment. One guy just got in touch and said, how are we asking, Dennis, sorry, I should use your name, Dennis. You're saying, why are people calling to have British officers patrolling the French coast when we don't even seem to have enough to patrol our own streets or our own waters? There seems to be this whole sentiment. If I'm trying to paraphrase, I can't read, obviously, every single thing that comes in. The question is, I mean, how? No one seems to have the answer as to what we can actually do. I think, Ellie, a lot of people are coming back to some of the points that you've made as well, which is, you know, that we have to be able to get, you know, as many people in as safely as we can, as often as we can. People are rightly pointing out here that we have homeless situations, doctors' surgeries that are bulging at the seams, schools that are bursting, etc.
I think we should address all of that as well.
Go on then.
Well, I think we should...
you think we should address them? I thought you meant on this panel we'll fix it.
We can and should fix the homelessness problem. We did that during the pandemic, you know. About 10 years ago, the funding for the NHS was much higher than it is now. We can put it back to that. We can give the NHS more money. We've done it
Isn't there a simple answer to this? I mean, obviously...
I don't think we should say... I totally agree with your audience, basically, who are saying we have all these problems in our own country that we need to fix. I totally agree with that, but I think that as caring people, we can also treat those who come to this country seeking safety with the compassion that we have.
Goodness me, I think we treat them with a lot of compassion. We help them into here, we put them up in hotels, we give them money, we give them food, we give them legally. I think we treat them with an awful lot of compassion.
What's happened yesterday has shown that actually we don't do that. We actually create a situation where...
Hang on, they died in French waters. They didn't die in English waters.
If there was a way of them getting here safely, it wouldn't have happened. I think no one can dispute that. You know, if they were able, I think whatever your views on this otherwise, whatever your political views, I think we can all agree that if people had the choice between taking a safe route on a ferry, knowing that they would arrive here and then they would meet a fair asylum system that would process them quickly, I think we can all agree that most people would sensibly do that and not risk their lives on a tiny boat, especially if they have children with them and especially if they're pregnant. Because we've just seen what happens when people have only that option.
Ali, isn't an idea, and I'm sure it must be more complex than I'm about to present or else it would have been done, but isn't an idea just to say, anyone that enters this country via this route, you will not get asylum. You just will not. You have to follow an official, recognised, proper route. If you do this, if you enter this country this way, we just will not give you asylum.
The problem...
What am I missing?
No, you're not missing anything. And I think the Nationality and Borders Bill that the Home Secretary is trying to take through the House of Commons is going to be trying to tighten up and indeed make it much more difficult. And also, as part of that, to Ellie's point, try and encourage people to apply directly for asylum from the regions which they're in. Try and actually make more of those safe routes available to people. But the problem, Michelle, is that when people actually land on the coast, you've then got a problem to deal with, right? What are you actually then going to do with them? Regardless of whether you say that we're not going to be granted asylum here, you then have a problem to deal with on your shores.
And I feel like a stuck record here because every night on this show, well, not every night, but pretty much every other night, it feels like we have this conversation. We never really get any steps closer to resolving it because obviously the situation is complex, or it would have been resolved by this government. I'm about to say Priti Patel, but I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of people that think she's not been overly effective in this. But carry on getting in touch and giving me your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to move on, take a quick break. When we come back, you might have seen in the news today, your taxpayers' money, our taxpayers' money, is being spent keeping the lights on at yet another energy company. I'll be asking, is it time to nationalise the energy companies? I'll see you after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello. Earlier today, the Met Office named Storm Arwen. We're particularly concerned about the strength of the wind, especially later tomorrow and into Saturday morning. There will also be some snow in places from this storm system. It's coming in from the north, so it's bringing in colder air, but it's really the winds really picking up later on Friday. Those isobars really squeezing together initially across Scotland, but increasingly further south. Some very strong winds during Friday night. Back to tonight, and the winds are picking up and bringing some rain across much of the UK. But ahead of that rain, clear skies will allow a fairly extensive frost across East Anglia and the south east. Temperatures may actually start to rise a little by dawn as the cloud spills in. It's going to be a cold day on Friday and a fairly grey morning with outbreaks of rain across much of England and Wales. Brighter skies follow, but so do the strong winds and increasingly snow showers over northern Scotland. In fact, that snow turning more and more persistent over northern Scotland, mostly over hills, but even at low levels there could be some, and routes like the A9 will be particularly treacherous with those strong winds making for blizzards. There'll be a bit of brightness in the afternoon, but it's not going to feel warm. Those winds are the biggest cause for concern widely across northern and western areas. Later on Friday, gusts of 50 to maybe 65 miles an hour, and an amber Met Office warning in place for the northeast, where gusts of 75 miles an hour, perhaps even a little more in some places during Friday evening and into Saturday morning. There is a warning for the snow as well. Those kind of winds could cause some structural damage, certainly make for some disruption on the roads, potentially cause some power issues also. There will be this zone of wet weather then sinking south on Friday night. That will still have some snow mixed in, mostly hills, but there could be a little bit at lower levels, so that's an extra hazard. Details of that snow on Saturday still uncertain. It does look as if there won't be much at low levels, and if there is, it'll melt fairly quickly. But still a cold wind blowing on Saturday. The weather warnings are all on the Met Office website. Bye for now.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
On Brazier at 8, as the RAF aims to go carbon neutral by 2040, are Britain's armed forces following America's towards a woke future? I'll speak to former Trump advisor Sebastian Gorka. Also, TikTok stands accused of allowing school kids to ruin the careers of teachers by making anonymous but unfounded complaints that go viral. I'll talk to the man dubbed Britain's strictest head teacher. And the rare dog days are over. Why the Whippet and Corgi have made a comeback. There may be a dog in the studio from 8.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, as taxpayers will be left with another bill, £1.7 billion to be precise. Well, at least as it stands at the moment, never say never about it growing. The reason for this bill, the UK's seventh biggest energy firm has collapsed. Bulb, you might have seen about this in the news today. It has more than 1 million customers and it's going to be propped up by the government to allow it to continue to operate. Administrators will try and get a restructuring deal or a sale or transfer of its customer base. And it's prompted the return of calls, of course, to renationalise our energy. Sir, do you think we should? Ellie, should our government be running the utilities or the energy? Let's keep it tight to the energy, I guess, for this debate. Should they?
So around 2 in 3 people in this country do think that we should renationalise energy, and I do agree with that. And the reason for that is, you know, it wasn't that long ago that we actually had publicly owned energy in the first place, and publicly owned energy is a natural monopoly, and what that means is that we all need it. You can't choose not to use energy, really. If you want to live in the modern world, you have to.
Yeah, it's an essential service.
Yes. So that means it's a monopoly. And what happened under the Conservatives when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister was that they wanted to create an artificial market. So they sort of allowed for energy suppliers, which is companies that we have now that take the energy supply and then sell it on to customers. And so it was this kind of experiment of trying to privatise an essential service. And I think what we can see now from what's been happening in the last few months is that experiment has failed, and we actually need to go back to public ownership, because I think that, you know, we can't have this situation where energy companies are going bust and where customers' bills are increasing by like massive percentages, particularly during winter. You know, we actually have to think about what is best for the people of this country. And I think it's that we need to be able to own the energy firms so that all of the profits can be reinvested back into the energy system and we can make sure that we keep bills low.
But isn't this more, because I get it, I get the sentiment of, yes, it's essential and now I don't want my energy or gas or whatever it is to be funding fat cats. That's what people say, fat cats. So let's get it out of there, let's get it into the government. But isn't that more ideological than kind of fact-based, evidence-based? Because when, if I think back to when energy, well, not me, obviously, so I'm way too young, but if one would like to kind of think back to when it was nationalised, you had things like frequent blackouts, you had frequent disruption of energy supplies, and actually those things now, they've not gone away, but they've certainly reduced the investment. When you look at the amount of investment that's gone into much of this infrastructure, that has increased as well in the private sector. So evidence-based, it's not really the same as the sentiment.
Actually, you know, when Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister, the first thing she did was she walked into the cabinet room and she threw this book down by a man called Friedrich Hayek. Is that right, Laurie?
Yes, correct.
And she said, this is what we believe. And that was a very ideological book that suggested that we needed to take things out of public ownership and actually privatise all of them. So the move to privatise in the first place was based on ideology. It wasn't based on evidence. And I think if you want evidence that the private market is not failing, just ask your average viewer. I would just ask your average viewer to think about their energy bills and how much they've gone up recently.
Yeah, they've gone up hugely.
Mine have gone up by £60 just this year. So, and I can luckily afford to pay that, but there's obviously millions of families in this country that would be devastating.
So, Ali, is the answer to this then giving it to the government?
No, I don't think it is. I think, look, in the short term, the government is going to have to take some action. I'm a Bulb customer. When I left the house this morning, the heating was still on. And the lights were still on. I hope that that's the case when I go home.
Well, courtesy of us, the taxpayers, it will be.
Thank you very much. It's very kind.
I'm paying your energy.
Indeed. Thank you. But look, I think that the government needs to provide, in this particular case, it's in special administration. I think that there are two issues here. One is that the energy price cap at the moment by the regulator Ofgem is only reset twice a year. Mm-hmm. That clearly, in a situation where you have acute spikes in energy markets.
When's the next one?
I think it's next March or April. Or
April.
Acute spikes in energy markets that we're having now. You have a global supply issues on energy and price issues on energy because we're waking up from this COVID-19 pandemic. You also have supply issues with Russia building its gas, about to seek regulatory approval for its Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline coming into Germany. And you're also having a conversation for the first time in years about small modular reactors, now nuclear reactors, to try and increase energy security in the country. So there's a complex picture when it comes to energy issues here. But I think the price cap is one, and I think it should be looked at much more frequently, particularly in a time like this. And I think the other issue is that people need to be allowed to have choice. The whole reason why the market was liberalised in the first place was because the profit motive was felt to actually increase competition, give people more choice. If people want to actually invest in companies they feel that are going to give them a better deal, they should. The problem is that a lot of those smaller companies cannot hedge their exposure in financial markets to volatility in gas and electricity markets, and that's the problem, because their credit ratings are not sufficiently high enough for banks to do business with them. And that is a problem that the government has to look at addressing in some way.
Yeah, and Laurie, what do you think about because I worry, I've got a couple of examples here, by the way, about where this has indeed happened. So one of them, Bristol Energy, that was earned, or at least majority earned, or 36.5 million pounds worth of taxpayers' money went into that venture. You might as well have opened a bucket with a hole in, poured it in, and end of that money. Because that was a real example, current day, of the public sector getting involved and failing miserably, some might say.
That was the instance of a local council, all of which have been cut to the bone, trying to set up an energy company to deal with two problems. The fact that the big suppliers, because they aren't actually exposed to the competition they're supposed to be, were overcharging people. They were scamming people, particularly vulnerable communities. And this is a misconception, investment in the energy market, right? In getting cheaper forms of energy, in making sure that we're not reliant on things like gas, in insulating homes, collapsed after the privatisation. The level of investment was far higher before privatisation occurred, and that almost fell off a cliff. So this was an example of a local council, in the case of Bristol, trying to sort out those problems. But councils haven't got and it'll probably
Together Energy.
Probably a local council.
That was Warrington, that second
one. And they've not got
Warrington's had massive cuts.
They've not got the ability to do this properly. And we find ourselves
in favour of nationalisation?
We're in a situation where the idea that you can have an effective market in energy, something that we all rely on, as Ellie is saying, and something that requires vast amounts of investment, to make happen. We can just band together tomorrow and be like, do you know what? We are going to either build massive energy assets like new power plants or whatever, or buy massively on markets to get energy. It's very difficult to do that. So the elements have competition. Like if we were going to set up a business on Etsy or something to sell glasses that we made or something, it's far easier than with energy companies. So these councils sort of heroically were trying to set up these things, but they didn't have the resources to make it happen. Nationally, we do have the resources to make that happen. I must also just add that there have been some councils that have set up companies that have been riotously successful as well.
Are you in favour of, say, like the National Grid as an example? Are you in favour of the National Grid being put into public ownership?
Yeah.
Are you?
The grid itself, right, so which is separate then to the people who are putting electricity through the grid, right?
It is.
For those who don't know about it. Yes, because why should you be making money out of moving things, that electricity in this case, that we absolutely need? There are also then companies, right? So the National Grid sends it around the country and then it goes down to the local area, and that's a different company. And many of those companies are owned offshore. Their money goes through tax havens. They overcharge us. This is pretty wild stuff.
But fundamentally, what it comes down to is capital investment in the infrastructure of the country, right? So the government has got a lot of other things to do. It's also presently got 2 trillion of public debt to deal with and 400 billion of borrowing on the back of the pandemic to deal with, and taxes are going up, inflation's going up, and interest rates are going to go up. So if you want real investment in the infrastructure in the country, it's perfectly fine to allow private sector companies to do it. However, you're right, Michelle, talking about monopolistic issues. It is a monopoly kind of situation, particularly with the grid.
That was Ellie.
So that's why you have regulation. That is the point, that customers don't get ripped off, and that's why you have regulators that allow the investors to make a reasonable return, and they have parameters of what that reasonable return looks like, and they allow that capital investment to come in. You're right about...
But none of that's worked, is it?
Can I just say, if you're a viewer of this programme, please will you message Michelle,
Yeah,
and
email
tell
me.
her whether you think you've been ripped off by your energy company
Of course,
or not.
all of you will probably do. But you'll be more familiar than I, probably, Ellie. I think it was in 2019, Labour in their manifesto did this policy about how they're going to nationalise energy, bring in energy home or whatever it was called. And one of the key statements that it was talking about in there, and I couldn't get over the audacity of it, I've got to be honest, was when they were talking about they were going to buy back the assets that belong to people like National Grid and some of the big organisations, and they were going to buy them back, and I don't think this is a direct quote, I've got to be honest, but along the lines, and they were going to buy them back at a substantial discount to market rates. Do you know what I'm talking about in the manifesto?
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
So Labour
lifetime ago, that,
had this pie-in-the-sky idea about this is how we're going to do it. We're going to take it into public ownership. We're not going to pay the market value of these assets. And people were celebrating and clapping and cheering that notion. And I find it, and I don't know if you know what I'm talking about and you support that, but I find it so bizarre that someone would be advocating going to a private organisation and telling them that they're going to buy their assets from them at a below market value and completely overlooking the fact that actually, when you look at where pensions are invested, lots of pensions are invested in lots of these organisations. So basically ripping off, it's fleecing anyway, it's not ripping off, you're fleecing these private organisations to take hold of their assets because you think that you can at a market rate, at a discount. And the people that would suffer from that are people like my viewers, people that have pensions. The pensions are invested in these organisations.
But that's not the only way that you could do that, right?
It's not my way. This was the strategy that was proposed.
Sure, and maybe that wasn't the best strategy, but there are other ways to make
I
this happen.
actually didn't think that Labour's energy policy in 2019 was very good.
Didn't you? Good. Well, we agree on that. I didn't either.
But I mean, I am in favour of public ownership. I just don't think that what they were suggesting was great. Anyway, sorry, Laura, I interrupted you.
But yeah, look, in a situation where we've had a dearth of investment in what we need to meet our energy needs in this country, to make sure people have well-insulated homes and all these kind of things, the model we've had for the last 30 to 40 years hasn't worked. So we need to do something different.
I think we can agree on that. And I think we can also agree what Ellie said. I think as a consumer, as a homeowner, as a renter, whatever you are, we all need gas and electric. And I think Ellie is exactly right when she says all of us are feeling the pinch. Do you feel ripped off? And let me ask you this as well, by the way. Are you someone that frequently switches? I've got to be honest. Sometimes I start the switching process and then I just get it's all a little bit complicated sometimes, and I abandon my mission. So if you are someone that feels ripped off, are you conscientious? Do you frequently switch as well to get the best deal? Get in touch with me and let me know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I wonder, is the Defence Secretary right to be cutting the number of boots on the ground in the army? We'll have that and more. Don't go away.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. Someone's just been in contact, Ian, asking a question. When we talk about essential services and talk about whether or not we should nationalise them, he asks, why are we drawing the line just at energy? Food, he says, is essential. Should we nationalise that as well? Goodness me, don't give people ideas, will you? Gosh, no. Anyway, the British Army has today announced its Future Soldier programme, claiming that the officers there are the most, basically saying that this, I was about to read out some spiel, I'm not going to. Essentially, they reckon this is the biggest transformational project that the Army has seen for quite some time. I've got to be honest with you there. It's about saving money, isn't it? Always the way with these things. You're going to see a reduction in the boots on the ground and more focus, I guess, on the threats of the 21st century today. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, said that he's going to shrink the Army numbers to 73,000 in 4 years. I wonder, Laurie, you know, what do you think to this? It is a reduction of about 9,000 people over a passage of 4 years, as I just mentioned there. Does this make you feel any less safe? Do you think it's sensible? Is it just crass cost-cutting?
I think, well, so the story from the armed forces is that the nature of defence is changing, right? We're no longer in the situation where, you know, if you look back to, say, the Second World War, where you had large land armies with tanks and other things, aircraft, naval engagements and things like this. So the nature of what could be warfare is changing to a more, what like they say, is hybrid. So stuff's going online, there's misinformation going around, there are impacts upon economies, stuff's happening in the financial markets and stuff, right?
Cyber warfare.
Exactly. So you need to change what your defence capability is to deal with all those kind of issues, right? The question that I have is whether that is a result more of cost cutting and the overall logic of austerity across government. You know, if you look at other parts like health, for example, or we were talking about things like energy just now, right? The approach is not necessarily what is best for the country. It is dictated by this wrong-footed idea that we need to reduce costs at any cost for then the things that we're provided with, like defence and other things. The other interesting thing here is that I don't think there's enough engagement with how defence issues are changing in the world. We have, I think, generally in the political discourse, a quite outdated idea of this. We've got the US, for example, investing vast amounts of money into very what so-called advanced weaponry, to nuclear weapons that in their posture could be used on the battlefield. These are issues that need to be more in the front line of politics instead of kind of left in the black box of military discussions.
Yeah, and obviously, Ellie, the army not just the army, the military do a lot more than just conflict. I mean, I feel like I hear conversations about wheeling the army out all the time. We had them with the fuel situation. I don't like calling it a crisis and a shortage because there wasn't really a shortage, but that whole kind of thing around getting the fuel distributed, that was let's bring in the army. Conversations recently as well around the Polish border and fixing fences there. That's let's bring in the army. So it's not just about conflicts, is it?
No, I mean the army has a sort of a role in lots of areas of sort of society. You know, people who are trapped in floods often are rescued by the army, for example, because they have the equipment to do that. But I wish, you know, when we talk about the army, when we talk about troops and funding, I really wish that we talked about more, and I know I've brought this up, so I'm being a broken record now, because I know I've brought this up on the show before, but I wish we talked more about veterans, because, you know, a lot of veterans suffer from PTSD. There's more homeless veterans than there are sort of homeless people in the general population, and we're seeing, you know, mental health services are sort of cut to the bone. Homeless shelters are being cut. There really is people who go and they fight and sometimes die because their country has asked them to. You know, that's a huge thing to ask of people. Our country asks people to do that all the time, and then they come home and they're just left with nothing. And I think the reason I feel so strongly about this, and I know I've mentioned this on here, and in this programme before, but my great-granddad fought in the First World War, and he was medically discharged. And he ended up with what I think we would recognise now as PTSD, but my grandmother always used to say he suffered with his nerves, and I think that's what she meant. And I was named after his wife as well. And when he came home, he used to walk around playing the trumpet for money because he couldn't get a job anywhere because people thought that veterans were too mentally unstable and they were afraid to give them a job. And so that was the only thing that he could do. And I actually question how much we've moved on from that. When you look at the figures of homelessness, I mean, you look at the amount of veterans who are suffering and they can't access mental health. You know, I actually think about my great-granddad and I actually wonder what position that he would be in now. And I completely agree with Laurie, you know, troops do not exist separate to the rest of society. You know, they're part of our communities. They go into the army. Like my husband is a naval veteran. He was educated and then he went into the army and now he's, Navy, and now he's sort of living a life with me. And, you know, so I think actually these are issues that, yes, they affect troops, but it would benefit all of us if we could actually resolve some of these issues.
Indeed. Ali?
Well, look, I think there are 2 points to make. The first is we can survive with a smaller army if we don't go on ridiculous misadventures like false prospectus to go to war in Iraq and staying in Afghanistan 10 years longer than we should have.
Well, I really agree with you there. This will be the
Great,
first time that we
superb,
really
nice
got
one.
there in the end.
Great. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think Laurie's right about the nature of war has changed. The reality is that if we're actually going to be engaged in armed conflicts, we're going to be doing it in concert with others, typically under a NATO banner or in conjunction with others, very rarely on our own. And the question really is, would the UK act alone to go and tackle China invading Taiwan in the South China Sea? Of course it wouldn't. Of course it wouldn't go and tackle Russia invading Ukraine. Of course it wouldn't do that. So we need to act in concert. Trump was right to hold up the NATO countries and say you should put 2% of your GDP into defence. We do that, others don't. We're actually ahead of the game.
Indeed. There you go. Now, what day is tomorrow? Friday, yes, but it's a special Friday, Black Friday. Got to say, I find Black Friday a lot of nonsense, something we've imported from the US. They talk about Black Friday, but I, for one, I've been seeing all these Black Friday deals for ages. So it's not just about Black Friday tomorrow, but nonetheless, a marketeer's dream. It is that day. I wonder, are you going to be excitedly logging on tomorrow to get the best deals or wandering around your high street? Get in touch and let me know. Laurie, do you get excited about Black Friday?
No.
Good.
Sorry.
You're sensible. I like that. Ellie, is it for you?
I will look for a bargain. I will. Yeah.
Well, you've got to be careful, you know, because I'll tell you for why. There's so many scams going on. I've got it here that apparently online crime during Black Friday and Cyber Monday, I mean, come off it. I mean, these are stupid, aren't they? Every single day. I remember when it was Boxing Day sales and that was it. But anyway, Black Friday and Cyber Monday, apparently in 2020, they defrauded UK shoppers by 2.5 million. So you've got to be careful what you're doing. And also, Ali, it's been proven that a lot of these deals are not even deals anyway, because actually these products were available often at cheaper prices at some point in the not too distant past anyway.
I think that's right. You've got to be very careful about unscrupulous retailers trying to get one over you. But look, my approach is I take the Greta Thunberg approach to fast fashion, which is that I try and use my clothes for as long as they last. I try and take care of them, and I'm not really an avid buyer of lots and lots of stuff. I actually prefer to work on the relationships that I care about, enjoy the countryside, enjoy the simpler things in life. I don't get my kicks out of just spending rampantly on endless consumerism, but that's just my view. Other people take a different view and they get pleasure from it, but it's something that I personally don't.
Well, there you go. You guys have been getting in touch. Leona says, I can't believe it. I agree with Ellie, says Leona. Yes, we should nationalise the utility industries once again because it was the biggest rip-off in British history, she says, when they were sold off. I remember those. I'm saying I remember it, and now I'm going to put myself to the test. Something about Tel Sid or something. I don't know. Anyway. Whatever. Lots of you have been getting in contact. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to read lots of them out, but also, like Ellie said earlier, lots of you do indeed feel ripped off by energy at the moment. A lot of people against nationalisation, I have to say, interestingly enough. Lots of people pointing out that the government hasn't done a very good job with lots of different things, including the NHS, for example, and perhaps that is indicative of their ability to run big operations. But do let me know what you think. That is pretty much all we've got time for tonight, unfortunately. Ali, Ellie, Laurie. Oh, you all right? That sounds like a nation rap. Ali, Ellie, Ollie. I was going to start singing that, actually, and I'll save your ears. I won't sing it. But anyway, thank you very much for your company, and thank you for your company as well. I will be back at exactly the same time, 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock tomorrow. So you have yourselves a very good evening. Don't be buying a load of stuff that you don't even really need just because somebody somewhere tells you it's massively discounted. Be sensible with your purchasing. That's what I'd say. Anyway, have a good evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello. Earlier today, the Met Office named Storm Arwen. We're particularly concerned about the strength of the wind, especially later tomorrow and into Saturday morning. There will also be some snow in places from this storm system. It's coming in from the north, so it's bringing in colder air, but it's really the winds really picking up later on Friday. Those isobars really squeezing together initially across Scotland, but increasingly further south. Some very strong winds during Friday night. Back to tonight, and the winds are picking up and bringing some rain across much of the UK. But ahead of that rain, clear skies will allow a fairly extensive frost across East Anglia and the south east. Temperatures may actually start to rise a little by dawn as the cloud spills in. It's going to be a cold day on Friday and a fairly grey morning with outbreaks of rain across much of England and Wales. Brighter skies follow, but so do the strong winds and increasingly snow showers over northern Scotland. In fact, that snow turning more and more persistent over northern Scotland, mostly over hills, but even at low levels there could be some, and routes like the A9 will be particularly treacherous with those strong winds making for blizzards. There'll be a bit of brightness in the afternoon, but it's not going to feel warm. Those winds are the biggest cause for concern widely across northern and western areas. Later on Friday, gusts of 50 to maybe 65 miles an hour, and an amber Met Office warning in place for the northeast, where gusts of 75 miles an hour, perhaps even a little more in some places during Friday evening and into Saturday morning. There is a warning for the snow as well. Those kind of winds could cause some structural damage, certainly make for some disruption on the roads, potentially cause some power issues also. There will be this zone of wet weather then sinking south on Friday night. That will still have some snow mixed in, mostly hills, but there could be a little bit at lower levels, so that's an extra hazard. Details of that snow on Saturday still uncertain. It does look as if there won't be much at low levels, and if there is, it'll melt fairly quickly. But still a cold wind blowing on Saturday. The weather warnings are all on the Met Office website. Bye for now.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Coming up Thursday on Dan Wootton Tonight, America's mayor and one of the most polarizing figures in US politics, Rudy Giuliani, will open up about the last days of the Trump administration, give his verdict on whether Biden can hold on for a full term, and reveal whether the Donald will return to the White House in an exclusive interview. Plus, I'll be joined by GBNews star Mark Dolan, body language expert Judy James, and my superstar panel, the former London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels,